Good evening once again, fellow compatriots, and Ramadan Kareem to our Muslim brothers and sisters. Welcome to the 6th edition of the Diaspora video conference session, and thank you for making time to join us this evening. My name is Prince Ade Omoli. I'll be your host for this evening and also the moderator for the 60-minute session for today. This evening, we have a very special guest. He's a trendsetter, a self-starter, a legal practitioner, and one of the pillars of this present administration is the Director General of the Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Commission, Dr. Babatunde Irukera. You're welcome to the platform, sir. Hello, doctor. I believe you could be on mute. Oh, yes. Hello, doctor.
Hello.
Now we can hear you, sir.
Yes, I was trying to mute, but I think you had it centrally unmuted.
Correct, sir. Thank you so much, and apologies for that, sir. Thank you so much, and we welcome you to the platform, sir.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Before we get started, I would also like to acknowledge the presence of a few VIPs. We've got a few VIPs that have connected from Nigeria and Russia. One of them is the top director at NIDCOM being Nigerians in Diaspora Commission, and her name is Mrs. Patricia Ene. If you're on the platform, please wave. Mrs. Patricia Ene, you're welcome to the platform. We also have executives from Russia. There are a few officials that have actually joined from Russia. Also, if you're on the platform, please wave. You may not be able to speak at this present time, but at least you can wave just to acknowledge that good, we can see you. So again, you're welcome to the platform. Thank you so much for joining this evening. To get started, we'd like to start by asking Dr. Irukera a few questions. A few advanced questions have actually been sent in before this event. I'll probably just go through one or two, and then we can kickstart the conference. First, Dr. Irukera, sir. Few Nigerians are aware of the task carried out, the enormous task actually carried out by the Fccpc. But for the benefit of those in the diaspora, sir, could you just give us a summary of the functions of Fccpc and the importance of that commission, of the Commission to Nation Building? Thank you so much, sir.
Okay, thank you very much for the question, and I appreciate that very much. Well, essentially, the Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Commission, as the name indicates, it's like, I always say it's one of the easier parastatals to understand what it does just from the name. And so competitive markets are perhaps one of the most important things to a vibrant economy, in the sense that it serves both business to consumer issues and serves business to business issues, in the sense that competition promotes innovation, promotes quality, promotes fair pricing. And so consumers get a better price, they get better quality, and then wider choices, because businesses compete for their custom. And what it does between businesses is that it levels the playing field, it eliminates entry barriers, and ensures that we have as many businesses in the space as possible. And when you have the more businesses you have in the space, the more vibrant the economy is, the more money is spent, certainly, the more innovation we have, and certainly the more jobs there will be. The consumer protection side of our work is both preventive and remedial, in the sense that we prevent abuses. And when consumers are dissatisfied or when something goes wrong, we provide remedies. I firmly believe that the greatest index for measuring an economy is consumer spending. And if consumer spending is an indication of how healthy an economy is, the question you must ask is what promotes consumer spending? And generally, we look at it from a disposable income standpoint, and that's only half the story. Satisfaction and price are key factors in consumer spending. The fairer prices are, the more likely consumers will purchase and make repeat purchases. The more satisfied they are, the more likely that they would make purchases also and make repeat purchases. And so we believe that a consumer protection regime and a robust competition regulatory framework are vital to economic development, or at least the most important indicators of how well an economy is doing. So that's really what our work is. What is the competition side of our work? It's really regulating mergers and acquisitions to be sure that business combinations are not becoming, they're not distorting the marketplace in a way that makes it difficult for others to survive in the market. And the consumer protection side, and then you've got things like we investigate monopolies, we monitor dominant operators to make sure that there's no abuse of dominance. We check all those other things that are anti-competitive, like collusion, price fixing, bid rigging, and conspiracies that are in restraint of competition or trade. And from the consumer protection side, misleading advertisements, inappropriate services, a lack of sensitivity and responsiveness to consumers, a lack of transparency and truth in lending and truth in billing. And so that, in a nutshell, that's the vast majority of our work.
Thank you so much, sir, for that robust and detailed response. We have a comment or question from Mr. J.K. Adebola, who's also a legal practitioner in the United Kingdom. Go ahead, sir.
Oh, thank you very much for having me, Prince Omole. And welcome to our special guest today, sir. Well, mine is just a comment, not a question per se, because I've been following the activities of Fccpc for a while now, and I know that you saddle with the responsibility of deploying regulatory tools to monitor and modify the activities of manufacturers and stuff like that, and ensuring that that consumers are get value for their money, which is commendable. But I just want to commend the Commission for one thing that it did recently, because that's what really came to my mind. During this COVID-19 pandemic, when everybody was confused, nobody knows, what to do, because this is something that came out of the blue and, shot everybody, in the eye. Your commission came up with something that I consider very, very, very vital, which is the published guidelines on, I think it's called Guidelines on Competition and Consumer Protection during this COVID-19 pandemic. For me, as soon as I saw that, I'm like, who is heading this commission? Because there's no better time for Nigerians to have something like that than now. And for you to come up with that, and the guideline is kind of very specific as to what you expect from both manufacturers, in order to ensure that consumers are not shortchanged, and what even Nigerians should expect in this era. To me, that's a master stroke, which I really, really want to commend the Commission for. And that again pushed me to go into your website, and if the testimonials that I saw there is anything to go by, I think the Commission deserves a lot of kudos. Moving forward, however, the only thing I would just like to say is that perhaps maybe some of this, especially this guideline that you published, if there's a way you can get that to be translated into major languages in Nigeria and get it out there to the masses on TV and on radio, especially in the north, because I grew up in the north, and I know that people from that part of the country, not all of them has access to social media, and what they thrive on all the time is this transistor radio thing. So if your commission can do something in that line, just to translate the guidelines alone itself will go a lot because there's so many misconceptions about what the government is doing regarding the palliatives and stuff like that, which again, in one of the meetings we held a couple of weeks ago, that was one of the things that I made. The comments I made to the I think the special advisor to the president, that some of the good things, many of the good things that this government is doing is not being showcased out there to the people, with the exception of maybe some of us in diaspora here who has interest in the government, who every now and then everything will pick up and try to upload. So maybe if you can, do something along that line, sir, I think that will go a long way in further boosting the services that your commission is rendering to the nation. That's all I've got to say.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for that. Before going back to the special guest, we also have a comment from Mr. Omogbolahan. Please go ahead, sir. You have the floor, sir. A comment or question.
Good evening, sir. Good evening, sir. My name is Omogbolahan. They call me Ogbeni Caesar. I want to. Can you hear me, sir?
I can hear you, sir.
Yeah. I want to first recommend you, judging from the premise you introduced the Fccpc. I remember chatting with one of the top shots of the APC UK recently, and I commended the chapter of the party for bringing in somebody like you. I followed you since you came on board as the DG of that agency, and I can tell you, and I can tell the whole of the Diaspora that you brought life to consumer protection in the council. That's the honest truth, because it was almost non-extant until you came on board, and everything you were able to do, everything. So I don't know if I'm going to be permitted to make this comment or probably to ask this question. The question is somehow highlighted. I remember in 2001, when Econet came on board as a GSM operator, a lot of Nigerians were exploited. MTN joined, and the exploitation was rather higher than that of Econet. But when Globacom came on board, Globacom came to break down their wings. That was when they introduced the per second billing from the per minute billing that was ripping Nigerians off. So at the end of the day, Nigerians were getting competitive prices for the values they were getting from the GSM company. Today, when you look at the cable industry, the pay TV industry, GSTV seems to have dominated everything. You hardly can even see what we call this other one, is it Saturn? So what is the commission doing, or what do you think the government can do to ensure that the services that Nigerians are getting from DSTV, the content is not rich enough? That's the honest truth. So what are you doing, sir, to ensure that they give us richer content? That's number one for DSTV. Number two, we discovered that DSTV charge arbitrarily. They can just come up in a day and say they want to increase price, and nobody's talking. Then the next thing on that DSTV2, I want to find out what the commission can do to help us appeal to DSTV, to help us go by pay as you watch, rather than all these monthly bills. Whether you are around, you are not around, you have to pay. But if it's pay as you watch, it will be better for Nigerians. So if I'm not around, like now I'm not in my base, I can pause, I can leave it. So when I come and pay for service I want to enjoy. So what can we do, sir, on those areas? And lastly, sir.
Thank you so much. Okay, go on, sir. Go on. We will go on, sir, Mr. Mogolan. But make it very brief, sir.
Yes, GSM company, sir. We thought that we have a poor quality network. Sometimes you make a call of about 30 seconds, 1 minute. You don't get to hear the other partner, and they charge you. You send SMS, it will not deliver, and they will charge you. So I don't know what can we do in all of these situations that people are being tortured for families that they don't enjoy. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mogolan. Thank you so much for those questions. I will go back to Dr. Irukera. Thank you, sir.
Good. Thank you very much, Mr. Omogbolahan. And I think it was Mr. Adhere who spoke earlier. Yes, Adebola. And very appreciative of the kind words both of you expressed about the work of the Commission and my role in the Commission. And I'll take it from the first. And Mr. Debola, you make a very valid point about ensuring that people understand what the operational model is at a time like this when we've got a pandemic. And we're doing quite a number of things in that wise. So the business guidance document that you have so rightly spoken about is something that's issued to the public, but primarily to operators and businesses. There's a whole bunch of other consumer education efforts that are going on, including on radio. One of the most popular grassroots radio services in Nigeria today is Human Rights Radio, which is Brekete, as some might know.
Yes.
We're there every and engaging there. Our consumer education folks go there, and sometimes I go there myself. And we're using all kinds of other channels, social media and otherwise, to pass messages, jingles, and all of that in different languages. One of the things we believe is that one of the most important things to do at a time like this is for those who provide services and those who manufacture goods to recognize what their obligation to consumers are. Consumers are already somewhat vulnerable by the very nature of the social pact or the commercial relationship between consumers and those who provide, produce the things they use. And so at a time like this, when operations are scaled down, movement is restricted, there's anxiety, people are apprehensive, the most important enforcement mechanism for the rights of consumers is to engage those who provide those services and goods to them. And one of the things that happened is that when the first index case in Nigeria was discovered on the 27th of February, on the 28th of February, the very next day, we issued an advisory to businesses about price gouging, about excessive, unconscionable, manifestly unjust increases in prices. And we see that in spite of that advisory and our enforcement regimen, there was still excessive increases in prices of sanitizers, face masks, some medications such as vitamin C, chloroquine, Zithromax, and then medical devices such as infrared thermometers. And so we had a very aggressive enforcement framework out there. And so at that time, consumers are really apprehensive. They don't even have the courage to demand or insist on their rights. At that time, they're concerned. And so whatever price people would buy. And as we approached the lockdown, I mean, and we got it under control somewhat, we understand that prices increase of some of these products anyway from a regular supplier. Is the unconscionable increase that was problematic. But as we approached the lockdown, it seemed that operators realizing or believing that operations would be hampered by a lockdown started increasing those prices inordinately again across the country. And the food prices, food item prices now joined. And so what we had to do was, since we couldn't be everywhere at a period like this, what we had to do was to take an unprecedented step. And we filed criminal charges against 4 major respected chains, supermarket and pharmacy chains in Nigeria. And as we return back to full operation, we look forward to prosecuting those cases. Now, what happened in the interim is that the Pharmacy Association and all kinds of other professional associations have engaged the Commission about how to find some kind of exit on this highway short of a prosecution or conviction. And we're open to those conversations so long as we can address the underlying issues and prevent this from happening in the future. The reason why we filed those charges in any case was that the possibility of getting across the country was obviously impractical. And so those who are in operation and those who sell products would see and recognize that someday their conduct could become subject of scrutiny and prosecution. So that's what we did. And so in addition to the guidance that you've seen online, we're doing a lot of other things. And we have a campaign that is known as Demand and Insist. And we're doing that campaign in multiple different languages, letting consumers know that the number one, the biggest, the most important tool in any consumer protection framework is consumers who demand on their rights and insist on it. And you'd be amazed how many operators would simply back off and behave appropriately just because consumers demand and insist. And so we've got a bunch of that going on the consumer protection space. As a matter of fact, I was in an online meeting with UNCTAD and many other regulators across the world, and the Nigerian case was one of the examples for leading a fight against price gouging at a time of a pandemic like this.
Yes.
Interestingly, when we came out with that, we came under fire, including in Nigeria, saying we're not a socialist state, prices must be based on demand and supply. But we were very clear in our minds that, that the law didn't support excessive exploitation. When there's a shock to the market forces are no longer free. Prices, a fair price is something that is negotiated between a supplier and a buyer in a free market. And the controlling word there is free. When there's a shock to the market, when there are not adequate suppliers in the market, that market is not free. You need a regulator who's going to step in to make sure that people do not behave inappropriately. And so we're doing that from the supply side and also doing a lot of consumer education efforts on the consumer side. With respect to Mr. Omogbolahan's question, a comprehensive competition legislation did not come into Nigeria until January last year. One of the first things, and Nigeria had tried to get competition legislation since 1999. And so I want to say what, about 20 years prior to when we got it. And there had been a few false starts that made it through the National Assembly, but never out of it. When I took on this role in April 2017, one of the mandates that was issued to me from the presidency was do whatever you can, pursue competition legislation, and let's see if we can get competition legislation. So we set out, and that was one of the first things, and I'm grateful and honored that we were able to do that. And so it will take time for the market to fully become a competitive market. As a matter of fact, internationally and globally, Nigeria is credited for very rapid advancement in institutionalizing a competition framework from the time it created a law. And so you think about it, one of the largest markets in the world, certainly the largest market in Africa with 200 million people, and the way that business had been done. So to have competition legislation that comes in that potentially criminalizes even the manners in which businesses had carried on, it would, for you to rapidly scale that up to a point where you're beginning to modify behavior is quite something. I believe that over a period of time, the space would become more level. For one thing, one of the things with the pay TV space that Mr. Omogbolahan made an example of is that we're looking at restrictive agreements. So content agreements that provide for exclusive mutual understandings, we would not allow that to continue. And so for instance, a CNN that has an exclusive arrangement with a DSTV has become illegal. And so to the extent that other operators are able to engage CNN, they'll get CNN. Because as it were, so just imagine any competitor with DSTV who can get CNN, which is considered a high standard for news. And so they will not be able to compete fairly. We're engaging also with respect to the Premier League and making sure that it's a transparent bidding process so that anybody who wants it can get it. Now, with respect to the consumer protection aspect, one of the first organizations that came under scrutiny was DSTV when I started in this role. And it got to a point where I took DSTV to court. And I actually went to court myself as litigation counsel on behalf of the Commission and on behalf of Nigerian consumers. And the issue then was that there were a bunch of issues that we were dissatisfied about, and we opened an investigation. And in exchange for that investigation, and DSTV approached the Commission and saying, why don't we we agree with some of the issues you're investigating. We're willing to come to an understanding on how to proceed. And we came to a mutual understanding, which was supposed to be a consent order. One of the key provisions of that mutual understanding was that they would not change any material term of their subscription agreement over a 2-year period, because prior to that, prices changed every 9 months or every year. And so obviously price is a material term of a subscription agreement. And so a few weeks to when we were supposed to execute this mutual consent order, they increased the prices, meaning preempting the consent order. And we thought that that was bad faith, and we went to court. The court agreed. It granted us an injunction asking them not to change any material term of the contract or not to modify the proposed consent order because it was bad faith. Now that is on appeal. But what is interesting is that in that period of time, from 2018, you note that DSTV did not change its price. Only recently did they announce a price change. And we immediately engaged and said we're opening an investigation to see if that price change was a unilateral conduct that could be an abuse of dominant market position. And they have since responded, reflecting that the price change is not something that materially affects their own bottom line. Rather, it's an increase to reflect the change from 5% to 7.5% in VAT, that it's a pass-through cost, that it's a tax on their services. But even at that, we're scrutinizing the conduct. The one other thing that you identified is whether there could be some different types of business models with the bouquets they offer. The pay-as-you-go is somewhat, we've analyzed that, and it's somewhat misunderstood in the sense that there's really, with pay TV, what you do is you pay for access. You don't pay for use. And what the provider does is that once you've paid and you've gotten access, you've got that access, you can view it anytime, you can do whatever you like with it. And so it's not like airtime where it's perishable time that you can do pay as you go. What has become confused in Nigeria is actually pay-per-view. Now, pay-per-view is not a payment for how much time you spend on television or watching your cable. Pay-per-view is actually an add-on service where there's certain movies or programs that have not made it to the regular television yet, but you have the privilege to watch it in your home without going to a cinema, and so you pay for that view. So you could pay maybe it's a movie that was $10 to watch when it was at the cinema, but it's now been downgraded to the $1 movie, but it's not openly available on TV yet. And so you can pay for that. You could say it's a $5 payment to sit in your home and watch for that view. And that's why it's called pay-per-view. It's not pay as you go. And there's nowhere in the world where pay as you go actually applies. When the content is already made available to you, it's up to you to do whatever you like with it. And you can look at that with Netflix and all the other ones. You have access, you've paid for access, and you can watch as much as you want with your access. As far as opening that space up for other players, we believe that what we're doing with eliminating the entry barriers and the restrictive agreements is such that others will be able to come in and compete more favorably. And I look forward to that also. I think I've answered all the questions.
Yes, that's, thank you so much, sir, for that. Again, another detailed response. We have another comment from, I believe it's Miss Natalia, please. You have the floor. Go ahead, ma'am.
Hi. Yes. Good afternoon or evening, depending on where you are. I just have a question relating to how resources and vital goods at this time is being managed. I know in a lot of countries there was a time of mass buying and hoarding of essential goods like hand sanitizers, wipes, face masks, and various goods like that. So I just wanted to know if there were any guidelines that were introduced to help protect consumers, especially people who don't have the resources to buy all at once, all these necessities at this time. So I just wanted to know if there were certain guidelines that were introduced in stores. I know here there's certain things like you can only buy 2 hand sanitizers at a time to help make sure that everybody has access to these goods. So I just wanted to know if there were any such guidelines introduced to help protect consumers at this time.
All right, then. Thank you so much for that question. We'll take one more before we go back to Dr. Irukera. We have Ms. Taiwo Coker. Ms. Taiwo Coker, please go ahead, ma'am.
Oh, yes, thank you. I've got a few questions. And one of the first question I'm going to ask is, thank you so much for what you are doing. And I was super impressed as well when I heard about the steps that you've put in place for people to monitor the selling of items to guide against COVID-19. So thank you for that. My next question, yes, okay, on COVID-19. Yeah, thank you. My question mainly is going to go on the items that are supplied, the infrastructures and things like electricity board, the government suppliers. How do your organization make them accountable to provide consumers satisfaction, i.e. sometimes there's no electricity supply and yet they charge people at the end of the month. They have to pay certain amount, whether they've enjoyed electricity or not. So please, what is your organization doing to ensure that those government suppliers are held accountable? And number two is in the aviation industry. When we do open, which we're going to open soon by God's grace, I'm very, very particular about our airports, Nigeria airports. I believe that a nation's airport is like your reception area to your country. And whatever you showcase in that place demonstrates what people will experience when they do get into your country. And when you've traveled to so many places and you come to Nigeria International Airport, sometimes it leaves a lot to be desired. Even when you are, if you want to use the restroom, you have to pay for something as little as tissue roll, or they send a wrong message to would-be investors, people that are coming to our country for the first time. You go and get the trolley. The trolley, they never have change ever. And you know that there's something going on around here. What is your organization doing, please, to sanitize and make sure that there is a kind of standard, world-class standard at our airports?
Thank you so much, ma'am. We'll go back to the doctor now to respond to those two questions. Thank you so much. Doctor, sir, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Ms. Natalia and Ms. Coker. And I figured your genders just by listening to you, not by making assumptions. The first question about fairness to consumers with respect to things people buy. There are two approaches to that. The first thing we've done, like I said earlier on, is that we've gone after suppliers from a price gouging standpoint, and we're prosecuting people right now. And because as far as we're concerned, this isn't a time for excessive profiteering. And as a matter of fact, it's a violation of the law. And so we got a bunch of those initiatives. Now, what remedies are available are the things I've spoken about. So, but how can consumers deal with this in this period? One of the things we did, understanding the scaling down of operations of government and even of businesses, is that we created a special COVID-19 special task force. And so we have a team that's addressing COVID-19 issues. As I speak now, we're always doing surveillance and sweeping. And so they're going into stores, and especially in the major cities, just checking prices, looking at inventory control, looking at supply chain management to understand what the initial list price was and what the prices displayed on the shelves are. And those investigations are continuing, and we're raking in, gathering significant information about different operators. One of the things we also did was to set up a special line, special channels for consumers to reach back to us. And one of the ways we find quite simply in Nigeria is telephone. And so we set up a dedicated telephone line with a WhatsApp application for consumers to reach back, send complaints, record voice notes, or send text, certainly upload videos or photographs of pharmacies, supermarkets, markets, wherever inappropriate conduct is occurring. And there's a URL page also. And if you look at the Fccpc COVID-19 response, probably can pull that up also. And so you can do all kinds of things on that URL page also, for feedback, for providing intel, reporting inappropriate conduct. And that is integrated with a complaint mechanism system. And it comes straight to us. And we've got a special COVID-19 team that's working on that. One of the things we've also done is to engage with like the banks and the telecommunications companies, asking them to identify a complaint resolutor for the for emergencies during this pandemic, and because the key areas of complaint, apart from price gouging, became telecommunications, banking, electricity, and broadband service. And so with all those key operators, we have people who we reach out to once a complaint comes in, and we're moving forward somewhat with that. We've done enough? No, we haven't. But one can only imagine just how terrible it would have been without the effort out there. I mean, although I'm still aggressive by the irritation and dissatisfaction people experience, but sometimes I mean, we're comforted by the fact that reading also and engaging with other regulators globally, this problem is not isolated in Nigeria. So same thing's happening in New York, it's happening in England, in Italy, it's happening everywhere. It's just a time where we have to come together. I mean, as a matter of fact, I think some of the actions we've taken in Nigeria are somewhat like more aggressive than in other parts. Jumia, which is the leading online e-commerce shopping platform, on account of working with us, delisted about 360 vendors and 168 items, which were basic hygiene products like this, because we realized people were gouging prices. And so we'll continue to do that as best as we can. One of the things we also do is to advise consumers that, look, you don't have to panic buy. And so we're working closely with the government, the Presidential Task Force, the Federal Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment, on making sure that supply chains and distribution networks remain open. Businesses are open for when people need to be able to access them, so that people don't feel the need to stock up excessively because they think the shops will be closed. And I think to a large extent, both the lockdowns, the systemic progressive easing or reopening, and the movement of goods and services across the country show that consumers are not apprehensive about whether they have access anymore. And it's now more of suppliers who are looking to take advantage of the situation. And those are the ones we're trying to tackle as we go. For Ms. Coker's question, thank you for your kind remarks about our work. I agree with you that there's still a lot of work to do with respect to sufficiently protecting the Nigerian consumer. The one thing that continues to be a bottleneck is that almost every service or manufacturing sector has a primary regulator. And we always have to gain alignment with this primary regulator to get the best consumer protection or competition regime. And so sometimes it takes some time, but we continue to work assiduously at it. For instance, with financial institutions, we need to get alignment with the central bank, with the telecommunications companies, we need to get alignment with the NCC. Power is a particularly unusual and difficult problem because there are many stakeholders and it's very complex. But the position we have taken is that we don't mind estimated billing, and frankly, consumers really don't. What people are against is arbitrary billing, because there's absolutely no rational connection between what people use and the bills they receive. And we've fought very hard over the past years on that. And some of that has really beginning to see some result. Earlier on this year, when the electricity companies sought to review their tariffs upwardly, we engaged and got involved with the NERC, which is the primary regulator, and we spoke across the country about what we thought was going to be inappropriate. I think people are willing to pay what is a fair price for what they use. We don't want to, I mean, we don't want the electricity industry to remain what it is. If the pricing for the units of electricity people use is inappropriate or is not cost reflective, then it does need to change. However, people should only pay for what they use. And so the position we took was that there needs to be a cap on estimated billing. We need to move the aggression for billing over to the discos, and so that they will be more motivated, they'll be incentivized to meter people. And so the NERC came up with an order capping estimated billing. And the discos have vehemently protested against that, saying that those caps are not cost reflective. And what I found extremely amusing about that is that on the first day that an order is signed, you're complaining exactly about what consumers have lived with for years. They've been paying rates that were not reflective of their use. And now you're complaining about charging them rates that are not reflective of that same use. I think that finding the balance between making sure that they're more aggressive in metering consumers and making sure that in the interim, those estimated bills are rational is really what would fix the problem. And so to the extent that we can hold them accountable to enforcing their own order the best way possible, making sure that these estimated billing caps are not exceeded and that consumers don't have to pay more than the caps, I'm sure that the discos will do a far better job of metering people, which is where we should be going. We don't want people to take energy without paying for it, but we certainly don't want people to pay for energy that they do not get.
Correct.
That's where that is going. With respect to aviation, I think that I spoke at an aviation meeting some months ago where I spoke to aviators and said to them that we're dinosaurs from our aviation practice in Nigeria. Airports are no longer, I mean, our airports remain a place where people just want to get on a plane and fly. And that has to change. The airport experience, both the air side and the terminal side experience in aviation needs to change. Airports have become some kind of metropolis worldwide. And that's the reason why people don't mind sitting at an airport for 6-7 hours for a connection, because you can shop, you can window shop, you can eat, you can do all kinds of things. And now that technology has gone so far, you can watch movies, you can do all kinds of things. And our airports need to go in that direction also, and the right investment needs to come in for that. I'm not sure government is the right vehicle for that, but I think that those are conversations that are going on right now. With respect to consumer protection in aviation, as a matter of fact, I'm going to be in a program tomorrow where we're talking about what the airlines need to do as they ease and return to flights. Because I think it's a vital consumer protection issue to make sure that we're protecting people from this pandemic, of widespread infection. We continue to engage on that. One of the things that has happened during the pandemic was stronger discussions with some of the operators in the airline industry about a naming and shaming, about on-time departures and delays and baggage delivery. Something that's been close to my heart for a while, so that people can now begin to make choices on which airline they choose based on their performance and their record. I think that as we're able to load that on, we'll begin to see some radical changes in how sensitive and responsive airlines are to consumers, at least the domestic ones.
Thank you so much, sir, for again another detailed response to those questions. We have another comment or question from M. Louis. M. Louis, I believe this has got to do with biometrics. M. Louis, you have the floor, sir. Go ahead.
Good evening, Barrister Tunde Irukera, Mr. Lewis here, Apology Lewis. The question is actually based on the biometrics that is being taken by various government agencies. This is in terms of consumer protection. Why are people's biometrics being taken by various agencies, whereas the biometrics does not change? I feel that is shortchanging the consumer. So if this can be harmonized and it can be taken once and shared, I think that should be better. And what is the Commission doing about this, please? Thank you.
Mr. Bolaji, before you go, I think this is with regards to the fact that when you go for your passport, you do your biometrics. When you go to the bank, you do the same thing.
Correct.
You go to another agency, you do the same biometrics. So it's the same. You have different agencies working for the same government, or they keep taking the same information that could be shared within these agencies.
Exactly. and it's time wasting for the consumer is inappropriate.
Thank you so much, sir, for that question.
Many thanks.
We'll go to Professor Adewale. Professor Bisi Adewale also has a question. Professor Bisi Adewale, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Babatunde, for your work. I am a procurement, logistics, and supply chain management expert. And the conversation all along has been very impressive, but majorly from the commercial point of view. But I want to actually divert debate into the public sector. Competition in the public sector procurement. I want to know if your organization is working with public procurement, and how is the organization actually managing competition in the public procurement? Because we've been hearing about the Chinese coming to the country and bringing even the cleaners to the country. This is against competition. It's not good for the public, for the Nigerian public. I just heard the other time that competition legislation just came to the country last year, or it's just going on last year. It hasn't been established before then. Now that it's coming in, what is the organization doing to advise the government to enshrine public procurement competition into this legislation, so that big corporations coming to Nigeria will be regulated and will be monitored in the way they compete in the Nigerian market?
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for that question. We'll take one more before we go back to Doctor. I believe we have from South Africa, Honorable Bola Babaride. Honorable Bola Babaride, you have the floor, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Prince Omobamoli. Thank you very much. And Dr. Irukera, thanks for honoring the invitation. My name is Bola Babaride from South Africa, but I'm in Nigeria. I have two questions. There may be the last one is three, because Omoba doesn't want too much to be delayed on the forum. The first one I want to ask you is that what are you really doing to harness or to make use of the experience of professionals from diaspora? For example, we can assist in the area of whistleblowing. It's an app that we can engage you with. Then you can go. We can also go through Prince Omali on that. Then secondly, we notice something, that when you are called from Nigeria, especially, and for example, you are in South Africa, the number of South Africa will show. Take for example, if you're not available to pick that call, and you feel that this person called me, it's a missed call, you want to call back. Unfortunately, you cannot get that number because they actually use a gray line, maybe VoIP, voice over IP, to call you from a normal line. It has happened. I'm currently in Nigeria. I will call South Africa. They will tell you, are you back in South Africa? I say, no, I'm still locked down in Nigeria. So showing South African number, and if that person is not online at that particular time, and he wants to call that number back, he will never get me. And we are paying premium for this. What are we doing to our telecommunication company? Because this is a ripoff. I'm using my line, I pay premium, and I want to call a place, and when I call, they are using gray line, voice over IP, whereas I'm paying the full amount, they won't be able to get back to me. Even it's not only on voice, even when sometimes when you send SMS, they actually send SMS to a number in another country, but the number that we show other side is not your number. That person will not be able to reply to you. What is that? That is very, very wrong. So what are you doing about that? And I want you to see, but I don't know whether it's part of your profile, you know, but if it's part of what you can do, I believe you should be able to assist, you know, in that regard. I have a lot, but I think that's fine. You know,
I think we will go back to the doctor now, and then thank you so much, Honorable Bola, for the question. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much for the 3 questions. I'll start first with the biometrics and identity management question. I quite recognize the point on that, and it's obviously a valid point. There are 2 things. First, I think NIMC, which is the National Identity Management Commission, is working on gathering biometrics for everybody as much as it can. And so the database is still relatively small. One of the largest databases we have in the country now is the BVN database, which is what the banks use. And even at that, you're still talking maybe 35, 36 million people. The other one that we have is some limited biometric by the telephone companies for each SIM card. And so until, and the central identity management entity would be the National Identity Management Commission. What you see is in the past few months, if you're seeking to renew your passport, a travel passport, there's a dual registration biometric capture for both the national identity card and the passport. So that's the process of trying to harmonize. It's a long, tedious process. It's something that we've paid lip service to for too many years. But at least for the first time, I think I see some coordination going on there. Having said that, though, there are certain limitations that make even data sharing potentially problematic. And that the data sharing is between government entities will not excuse it. And so, for instance, if the central bank would share data about you with the NCC, we would be concerned about that, because there's no real reason why the NCC can have the prerogative and certainly the appropriate right to know about your identity from a subscription location standpoint, but the kind of information that your central bank would have about your banking and your behavior, your purchasing behavior, or your transactional behavior is such that I would be concerned if the NCC would get it or not. But NITDA, which is the Office for Technology Management, working strongly with the now new Ministry of Communications and the Digital Economy, have come up with data protection guidelines and how to coordinate and literally harmonize all this data we have from the different places, whether it's from the banks, from the NCC, from the passport office, and how to determine what level of access, centralizing that, and determining what each organization should have access to and how to manage that access. I think that is ongoing, and it will certainly address the point you've made about us having multiple data gathering points that constitute an inconvenience to consumers. I'm hopeful that this would happen very quickly, even though I've seen the signs that there's some work going on there. We're monitoring it, and we're monitoring it primarily from a convenience to consumers standpoint and a sufficient privacy framework to make sure that consumer data are not becoming compromised, whether in the hands of different government institutions or not, whether they don't care. And certainly, we want to make sure that whether it's banks or telecommunications companies are respecting, or even, they're respecting data sharing protocols, and certainly consumers to take advantage of their data even when they're changing, whether it's changing their banks or changing their telephone company and all of that. So there's quite some work going on in the digital space. It's quite complex. My bigger concern from a competition and consumer protection standpoint is really appropriation of data gathered in Nigeria internationally, where that presents now an advantage to multinationals over indigenous companies because they're gathering the data here. For instance, the EU has very strong data protection laws that prohibit cross-border data transfer. And so we're at a disadvantage if, for instance, the foreign airlines that pick passengers from Nigeria every day, and they have all this information about the passengers, their travel habits and all of that, their loyalty programs, and that data is gathered here in Nigeria, transported immediately to the EU, and then there's prohibition about returning that data to Nigeria. And so not just Nigeria, but Africa, one of the things I'm championing at the regional level is that Africa needs to take ownership of that space, and we need to confront the global north with respect to data management. And I said, I was speaking at a program in Harvard a few months ago, and I said to them, I said, look, Africa has the audacity and the skills right now to make its own data protection laws. And we would go in a direction that might not be harmonious with the worldwide global north direction. And so it's high time that we all sit at the same table and find a data management framework that is global and fair. And so I think that some of these things that you've identified are things that would play into that. COVID-19 has slowed many things down, but I'm sure if that didn't happen, we would have seen some progress, both nationally and certainly globally. But I look forward to us getting back to those issues. And to the next question from Prof. We do have a role. We're not scrutinizing public procurement for fairness, but there are rules against bid rigging. And so any collusion in public procurement would be anti-competitive. And that would certainly invite our scrutiny. And again, leveraging in an inappropriate manner. So restrictive agreements where two companies might come to a mutual understanding that we won't do this if you do this. And those agreements are extraneous to the bidding, to the procurement process in question. We would certainly penalize that. The worst thing is where companies mutually agree that, you know what, you bid, I won't bid. Use my resources to bid. Or, you know what, you bid on this one, I'll bid on the next one. That's a bid. We're certainly looking very seriously at that. One big area for us is federal government construction work. And so we're scrutinizing those areas and creating the business guidance that will be required for, and the BPP, the Bureau of Public Procurement, works very closely with us on a range of different issues. And so like you rightly noted, it's just been a year, in fact, less than a year if you think about the slowdown that we've experienced in the past, since the first month of this year. I think it will take time. I think we're loading up as rapidly as we can. We shouldn't forget that this agency is just 247 people monitoring the markets in 774 local government areas and protecting 200 million people. And so, but we're loading up as rapidly as we possibly can. I think that's my response to that. And to my brother in diaspora from South Africa. I used to be in diaspora also, and prefer to believe that I belong in the diaspora constituency even
Definitely.
One of the things, and I've had this conversation with Mrs. Dabiri a number of times. I think that if you think about Asia, if you think about China, if you think about India, these are countries that maximize the skills they had in diaspora. And they've used that to leapfrog significantly. Anything technology transfer in the world we live in today is lip service, because technology has just become, I mean, global. There's nobody who's going to transfer it. The reality of technology transfer is taking advantage of your skilled citizens in different parts of the world and them contributing to the process at home. And the good thing about the Nigerian diaspora is that they're keenly interested in moving the country forward. Quite unlike Asian diasporas who make a home in the West to the point where they completely feel at home, Nigerians in diaspora make a living, become comfortable in the West, but have not regarded West as a new permanent home. That's an incredible advantage, and we would do right as a country to understand that. I think one of the biggest things we've done is pursuing a diaspora bond. And my sense of that is that if you can, I mean, there's nowhere in the world where an investor, you're going to invest in a company, you want a board seat. You want to oversee your investment. And so if we're looking to access funds in our diaspora, it must necessarily go with an access for them to contribute to how those funds are expended. And so we must find a way to take the best advantage of the skills that we have in the diaspora. One thing I would say, though, is that the diaspora must organize in that manner. There's too much going on at the same time. There's no government in Nigeria that's going to stop breathing and say, all right, let's go to the diaspora and go and see if we find the people. It's not likely to happen that way. At best, what we will find is a willingness and an openness to engage. And so that shake has to be across. Yeah. Not and one of the things I've experienced in my travels, both at town hall meetings, whether for myself or traveling with very senior government officials, is that the engagement at the diaspora level needs to be modified. I mean, and I hope I can speak frankly because I'm one of you.
Please, yes, we will. Go ahead, sir.
We need to do some research. I remember working and living in the United States. One of the most important things we say to ourselves is, if you're going to go interview in a company, research that company. You arrive at an interview and even just call the company's name wrong. I mean, even if it's spelled in English but pronounced in French, you're halfway through your interview for getting it wrong. And so by the same token, we've got to research Nigeria. And what we're doing here is one of the opportunities to do that, engaging the people who sit in the offices and are doing something daily. And so when these leaders come, the more you're able to engage them at the point of need and being able to just say, look, here's what we understand the problem to be. And here's what the solution we propose. The much earlier things would happen. I remember being at one of the meetings where it was just our diaspora brothers and sisters just literally talking down at this government officials about how poorly things are done back at home, how weak the systems are, and how it just seems that people who go into government, when they get into Nigeria, something happens to their brain, it gets sucked out, you know, and all of that. And so at some point, a polite government official would sit through the meeting, learn nothing from it, get on the plane and take nothing home. We've got to be more. It doesn't matter that we have these aggravations. It doesn't matter that we have these frustrations and irritations. It doesn't even matter that our criticisms are factual and accurate. We just have to be strategic.
Yeah, correct.
Be strategic in how we engage. And I think that some of the silver lining out of this pandemic is this type of engagement. The more of this we participate in, the more of it we understand. For instance, just look at how much you've gotten from where we are on identity management. Look at how much you've gotten, some of the things. And so we can really begin. And then so in doing this, we're building our network. I mean, I'm hopeful that the people who are here would be able to engage me if they have questions in the future. I might be able to direct them to the right place. We've spoken about management, which is better consumer protection or competition, and all of that to build the network, one, and also get a better sense of what is on ground and what needs to be done to improve it. And so that when the opportunity comes to engage, whether it's the president, the vice president, the ministers, whoever, we're a lot more strategic in the conversations and more bespoke and tailored.
Of course.
Yeah. I'm certain that to the extent that they continue to travel with at least with people like me. I mean, I'm a diaspora and I'm an advocate for it. I mean, I studied law in Nigeria and never saw the inside of a courtroom until I got to the United States. And for the 11 years I lived in the United States, I never saw the inside of a classroom, but I lived in the inside of a courtroom. And so all the knowledge that I used to practice law in the United States, I got it from Nigeria. All the litigation skills that I came back to Nigeria with and used to sue large corporations like Pfizer and everything, I learned it in the United States. So there's a lot that we can give. And so I, for one, respect that. And so if I am with any senior government official, I certainly can tell them, look, there's a lot to tap from in here. And I think it's in that place where instead of being skeptical or cynical, they're more engaging, and our criticisms are far more constructive. And we should just recognize that, you know, I mean, we can condescend to the leaders, not even just to the leaders, to the people here. I see that a lot. I mean, I see that a lot of our people abroad think very little of the people at home, in part because of the problems at home. So it's easy to assume that a bunch of people at home really don't know what they're doing, or else we shouldn't be in this mess. For instance, why don't we have pipe-borne water if we have? I mean, so somebody who calls himself a water engineer from Nigeria must certainly be a clown because people don't have water. That's not necessarily the case. And so the more we're willing to look at our contemporaries who are at home, who sometimes many of them are some of us in diaspora who returned. I mean, here you are, we're speaking. I mean, there'll be people here who think that I don't know what I'm talking about. And there'll be people who have never heard me and think, you know what, he's back in Nigeria, so he must be a fool like the rest. And so the more we're just open-minded and more engaging, the quicker we're going to move to collaborating together to make our nation greater for all of us.
That's good. It's good. It's good. It's great. Thank you so much for that, sir. If I've not learned anything today, this last word is, I think that's something for everyone to take back home with and also discuss with fellow Nigerians in the diaspora. Moving on quite quickly because we're now running out of time. We've got from South Africa, we're flying to Russia. We have a question from one of the officials in Russia. Please go ahead, sir. You need to unmute your device, please. Can you unmute your device, please?
Yeah.
Go ahead, sir. You have the floor, sir.
Yeah, good evening, sir. My name is Ambassador Lekan Idowu. I'm in Moscow, Russia. My question is, I want to understand that this is much of government rather than politics. But as a matter of fact, I want our speaker to talk briefly about what do you think people in diaspora actually gain from political aspect of view, from being engaging to people in diaspora. I believe that some of us already have some establishment, but some are just coming up. And apart from get to know about what the ministry or the parastatals is all about, what other political aspect of it can the people in diaspora can gain from it, especially from a structure that is just coming up to have a stand in a country like Russia. Thank you.
When you say gain, what do you mean by gain? Do you mean gain as in being appointed? Do you mean gain as in being sent money? I mean, I think the doctor's just given us a robust explanation as to how to go about it, which is first and foremost engaging with people back home like this platform that we have, and also at least respecting those that we have back home. So again, can you just clarify what you mean by gain? What's that gain? What do you mean by gain, sir?
Yeah, thank you. As a political personnel, let me put it in that way. Some of us will have some political like affiliations back home, like getting engaged in some of I don't know if it sounds appropriate using this platform, but I want to take it from that is a voice from an angle that I believe that something can still be done on that regard.
All right, okay.
How can we make?
Okay, yeah. I think I understand where you're coming from. Well, I'll leave that to the doctor. Like, I'm not sure this is the platform for that. but again, I'll let the doctor respond to that after we take the second question. So from Moscow, Russia, we're flying back to the United Kingdom. We've got Mr. Daniel. Mr. Daniel, sir, you have the floor. Mr. Daniel, your comment or question, sir.
Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Yeah, I have a question. I think I did my national identity card sometime in 2015.
Okay.
Until now, I've not gotten the card itself.
Okay. Where was that done? Was that done in the United Kingdom? Was that done in Nigeria?
No, in Nigeria. In Nigeria.
Okay.
So I've not gotten it. I don't know, maybe there's a way I can say it here and it will be, the voice will be heard. I think a lot of people are also going through that same issue. Since 2015, I've not gotten the card, nothing.
All right, okay. I'll probably leave that again to the doctor, but I do have a comment or two about that. I mean, there are ways of going about things like this. First, you might as well go back to the office, go with your receipt. Have you paid? Did you use the right channel? Were you there? You know, there's so many things. It's like 1,001 questions to actually respond to that. But again, I'll yield to the doctor to actually respond to that. Thank you so much. We'll take one more question or comment before we go back to the doctor. It's Alhaji Adams Dauda. You have the floor, sir. Alhaji Adams Dauda. Thank you, sir.
Yes. Good evening, Dr. Babatunde. Well, my question is, have you had any engagement with the beverages suppliers in Nigeria? Have you had any complaint with them? And because I'm in that space, in the distribution channel space, and the competitions there, and their pricing, and something to do with the expiring date of their products into the consumer markets, and the invoice as well. The invoice to the channel, the VATs, invoicing of the VATs is unambiguous and very confusing.
All right, sir. Is this an indictment of that particular industry?
Well, it's
do you
an
have
industry.
Proof? Is a report? I mean, can you just clarify that?
It's an industry which I'm in. I'm in that industry, SMEs, about 10 months now, going to a year.
Okay.
So I'm collecting some report now with, distributors.
Okay.
And since I've seen your website,
okay.
Once I've got more information, I'll go there and possibly, it's good that we have competition now. There are 3 of them. I'm not going to mention them. There are 3 of them. But the operation in the market, the channel, the way they treat the channel needs some investigations.
All right, okay, sir.
Some complaint.
One of the executives will leave an email address within the messaging column where you can send the report. We will get it to the Fccpc office. Before I go back to the doctor, Dr. Irukera, there is, this is one of the advanced questions that was actually sent in. This has got to do, it's actually got to do with a Chinese-only restaurant in Lagos. We understand there are about 3 of them, or maybe 2 from the report. And I just wanted to find out what the Fccpc is doing about that. I mean, today it's the Chinese, tomorrow it could be the Italians, day after it could be the Ghanaians. I mean, we know that's surely, definitely against the law. You can't have a restaurant in Nigeria and actually make it mandatory for only the Chinese to attend or to actually visit or come into such restaurants. What's the FCC? Is the FCCPC aware of that report? And if yes, what's the FCCPC doing about it, sir? Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. But first, there's a question that I didn't address from Mr. Babatunde earlier, which was a question about call masking. Where you get a call, call is routed and it's switched and routed through some random number. Essentially what that is the way the telecom system works now is that calls are routed and switched. So you have routers and switches. And so operators are looking for the cheapest way to carry their calls through. And that's a technology that improved from the scratch card, telephone scratch card of many years ago, which many of us, when we lived abroad, used to call home. Call masking is against the law because there are already established rates that the telecommunications regulator follows. But it's not anything that happens through the government or by the government. In fact, I'm surprised that this is still happening. It had become really, really bad sometime last year that you couldn't even tell who was calling you every time. And it was a technology. The operators already knew how to do it. It's all a satellite system. And so what the NCC did was to purchase technology for scrambling. And so they would literally go from place to place, scrambling and trying to find which telephone operator was doing this or not, and find them heavily. And so only after that where the things get better. But from what Mr. Babatunde has said, that's something still happening. I would certainly provide this feedback to the NCC. And they just probably need to just ramp up surveillance and enforcement on that. But yeah, call masking is certainly against the law.
Thank you, sir.
The next question after that, I believe that was from Russia.
Yes. The party gains being part of the party structure.
So what I would say is the reality of it is we've got to recognize what our political structure for what it is. There's absolutely no way, and this is the case all over the world, where everyone who contributes to a process would be recognized in that process. And it's actually a broken system that makes it almost entitlement to say, you know what, I participated in the political process, and the outcome of that is some kind of a benefit to me. You should just imagine all the people who campaign for a party or a candidate in the United States, and how many times at the end of the day, hardly any of them even gets into any role. Many of them don't even get to know the candidate. Candidate doesn't get to know them and all of that. We've got to move to that point, but we're not at that point yet. We still need to continue to build a critical mass of people who do the work and then entrust governance into groups, into certain groups of people who do the work. And what I would suggest is we must also organize politically in a manner that is strategic. Again, it goes back to the engagement. Even though that doesn't even assure of us a 100% outcome, but it's the best way. And so we must organize. For instance, where we have the APC UK, and that's the platform for this conversation. So we must organize properly in that manner. And so we must continue to fight and say, you know what, when elections end and God helping a desired candidate or party wins, we must say, look, let's look to all our partners and all the groups we are, and let's find people there. We can't find everybody there, but we must find people there. And it's how to organize and make sure that our organizing creates impact. It is more challenging for political parties, diaspora organization, in the sense that you can begin to say, well, ultimately it's boots on the ground and winning elections, but that's wrong. And the diaspora organization, when very well organized, have incredible influence, not just on voting patterns, but certainly on the ability of a new government to succeed. Perception is more than half of reality. If you're perceived to be getting the right people into governance, you'll be far better embraced, especially internationally. And we can say that the international community plays very little role in who wins elections in Nigeria, but they play an incredible role in how governments succeed in Nigeria. And so we must find, as the diaspora ourselves, we must find what our strategic advantage is and engage based on that. But if we want to engage on the basis of, after all, we're APC or we're PDP, we're here, we're supporting, that's not our most strategic platform. Because we will be contesting a space with people who went into the huts and the hamlets to bring voters out in an environment where voting is not quite as dynamic as what you're used to in the West where you are. And so we must look for what is most strategic and engage. Now the guys, the ward leader and all of that at the lower level, they cannot feel the positions that the knowledge, skill, and sophistication that comes from the diaspora would feel. And so why would the diaspora want to make its claim to fame based on exactly what that fellow does? We're just not getting anywhere. And so if you really look at it, you have a government that comes in and wants to reward that fellow. And the only way government can reward sometimes is, all right, let our best people who we worked with come and man the government because they know us, they know everything about us. And so they go reward that fellow with what? Maybe director general of an institution. And so the criticism of government now becomes, it doesn't have the best hands, it doesn't have the competent people, it doesn't have the square pegs and the square holes. Whereas all these holes are square and all the square pegs are right here in diaspora and some at home, but haven't engaged in the most strategic manner. And so what I always say is diaspora should concentrate more on the governance aspect of politics. And if you're helping a government to shape, or if you're helping a political party or an aspirant to shape policy, deepen manifesto, clarify objectives, you're the natural choice for executing your own idea. But if what you want to do is, okay, we're here, there's a rally going on, we'll join that rally live until there's diaspora voting. All you're doing is showing support. That's still not your most strategic engagement. And you've seen how social protection, social security works, electricity, rail system, you've seen it all. And so what is anybody aspiring to lead this country going to sell apart from that? How can we diversify the economy? How can we make the best of what we have? How can the rail system work? How can electricity be better? How can we provide social protection to the people? You have the NHIS, you have social security, you have all those things in the places where you're coming from. And you don't need to import it, but we've lived through it. We have knowledge that we can deploy. And for instance, I'll give you an example. When the vice president was actively writing the roadmap for APC as we know it today, he was keen on the social protection, and that has become the flagship. And I remember participating on that, and as we're writing the conditional cash transfer, I was using my knowledge from the US to say, listen, it has to be conditional. Children who should be immunized must have their shot, and children who have schooling age must be enrolled in school. We must show evidence of that. Instead of the children being on the road selling things, let them be in school and let them be. Can you imagine how important that will now be now when a vaccine for coronavirus comes out? That you cannot get your conditional transfer until you show us a child vaccination card. And that's all because I lived in an environment where I knew that federal funding didn't go to certain places unless you participated in certain federal programs. And so those are the types of things contributing at that level. And so you can't see your contribution as what will ultimately win the election in a matter of numbers. You must look at your contribution as what will win the election from the standpoint of what the party or the candidate is even selling.
Hashtag.
Because when the candidate wins and needs to deliver on what he sold, you who created it or clarified it would become very important. And so that's it for me. The other piece for me is political participation. And I've run for office. I've run for governor in my state. And we're going to have to, so maybe all I've done is crack that ceiling. I don't even know if I'll ever be governor. I don't know if I'll do it again, but we put a crack in that ceiling. And one thing I discovered in that process is that there's absolutely nothing these guys on ground have over you. You have a far better message, you have a far better understanding, you will resonate far better with these people. And so you are as eminently, if not more eminently qualified. My approach to money is that, provision follows vision. Just clarify the vision first. Let's get to that point and let's drop it. Let's know that we couldn't proceed because we didn't find money. But I'm not going to sit here and say that there's no money so we don't start out. We just have to be courageous. And I'm not saying arrive from Moscow tomorrow and print flyers. No, but have a path. Have a path. I contested in 2015. I was asked to come out of the race. The pressure on me to contest in 2019 was because of what I did between 2015 and 2019. And okay, so I didn't win in 2019. I was runner-up in the primaries. But we're only in 2020 and people are talking about, are you going to do this again in 2023 or not? That's the process. So we just have to be more courageous and recognize that ultimately serving people is never going to be by microwave. We have to contribute, have to be doing things in the community. And that should be our credential, not that we have some money. Because I assure you, the guys who are doing this the inappropriate way, we would see their end sooner than later. And that it would be sooner because people like you get engaged. Without question. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for that, sir. That was another detailed, brilliant response, sir. Going ahead quite quickly, I believe this is the second to the last question. We've got Pastor J.O. Adeni. Pastor J.O. Adeni, you have a question, sir, or a comment. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. I really appreciate that. It goes along with the telephone calls to Nigeria. You mentioned it earlier on. Every time I make a call from here, my number will not appear, the caller's identity will not appear. It's either Airtel number or MTN number that will appear in Nigeria. And people will be asking me, when did you arrive? And some people will not even say anything until I thought that it is me. But it's not your number. So, sir, you help us do something about this. I
believe it's the same call masking that the doctor actually spoke about. He actually responded to that.
That's what I said, yes.
He's actually responded to that question already. So you're just, this is an additional comment just to remind him that at least we need to do something ASAP, right?
Yes, sir, because I had it in mind before, yes.
All right, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. And the last question will go to...
to address this restaurant question, though.
Oh, yes, sorry, sir. Yes, please. The Chinese only question, please. Yes, sir.
I told you about that earlier on this year. I walked into one. I shut the place down myself. And when the lockdowns were occurring, we were hearing about Chinese companies that were sequestrating their employees and blocking them on the inside and not letting them go outside in unsafe working conditions without sufficient social distancing. I went in there and closed them down too. And so if I get intel, I will, mark my words, I will shut down that operation. There can be absolutely no rational, acceptable, sensible reason to exclude Nigerian patrons from any commercial establishment in Nigeria. It is unacceptable. Not take it. I understand some of them have a good service and people want that service. So I'm not going to say they can't do business. They just need to comply. If you exclude Nigerians from your business, we would not allow you to continue. When you clean your act up and we're welcome in there, not only would we allow your business to continue, we would welcome your patrons there with you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. That's quite pleasing to hear. Again, we will be passing that information on. A few Nigerians in the diaspora, I remember I was in a group, I think about 3 days ago, and that was the topic of discussion for the day. We will be passing this response to them to know that something is being done and that a few have actually been shut down because of that. So thank you so much for the good work that you're doing, sir. We've got Mr. Osaro. Is it Mr. Osaro? You have the floor, sir. Osaro Mavis. Mr. Osaro Mavis. Go ahead, sir.
Hello.
Hello, sir. We can hear you loud and clear. Go ahead, sir.
Okay. Once again, I thank everyone who has been on this platform, and everything that was said here, though I was having a network problem along the line. So what doctor said, I quite understand, and I try to follow it up. You know, there was an issue that was raised concerning the Nigeria airport when you are coming in and the issue down there. It will be something that we have to really look into, because it's not portraying the good image of our country. I remember a few years ago when some delegates came to Russia here, we also brought that issue to their knowledge, and they promised that they are going to work on it.
Do something about it, okay.
Yeah, we brought that issue when some ministers came, and we made them to understand that the image that's being portrayed at the airport by Nigerian immigrations and other people there is not something that is giving us a good image as a country. So they promise that they are going to work on it. I still want to use this medium to appeal to the doctor to still look into it and see how they can still work on that very particular area. Nigeria is a great country which other countries are looking at, no matter the situation or the bad government that is facing that country right now. But I believe sometimes, some days, God will bring a leader that will know the word of that country and put it in order. So
thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, sir. We have a leader already that's laying the foundation for that greatness. And we're sure that come 2023, we will also have another leader that will consolidate all the achievements that we've been able to come by between 2015 and this present time. So we'll keep praying, and at the same time, we'll also keep working. I'll go to Mr. Saludin. Mr. Saludin, you have the floor, sir. Mr. Saludin.
Hello. Hello everyone. My name is Salaudin.
Salaudin, sorry.
Yes.
Apologies for that.
Yes. Thank you so far for the wonderful discussion. This is the first time I'm joining, so I've really gained a lot today.
Thank you so much.
So the pertinent question, I'm in the health sector, so the pertinent question on my mind is, I believe COVID-19 pandemic had been like a wake-up call to the Nigerian health sector in various aspects. One is PPEs, two is provision of our hospital equipment. What steps can be what steps can be put in place to protect Nigerian manufacturers? Because I believe most of these things can be manufactured in Nigeria. All we just need is consumer and producer protection to provide adequate competitive environment for them to produce it at an affordable rate so that we can have those systems working effectively.
All right, sir. Okay, yeah. Go on. Land. I'll allow you to land. Go on.
Yeah, so a very good one for me was I initially worked in the Middle East before moving down to the UK. And the country I worked in ensured that even if you are going to be importing medical equipment into that country, they ensure that that company has to establish that manufacturing industry in their country. And that provides one job opportunities for the people. So what can we do in Nigeria just to help in that aspect, to protect our own manufacturers, to produce our own PPEs, our hospital equipment, so that we won't face situations like this in the future?
Thank you, sir. And the last comment is from Miss Edith. Miss Edith Wachuku. Miss Edith Wachuku, you have the floor, man. Go ahead, man. Miss Edith Wachuku. She just stepped, she actually stood up a minute ago. Is she still there? Miss Edith? Okay, we'll go back to we will go back to the doctor to answer the questions. Dr. Irukera, sir, you have the floor, sir. Thank you, sir.
Right, thank you very much. The one thing that I think is very clear, and Nigeria was certainly caught unawares, the lack of preparation, is that we need to look inward. We could not immediately ramp up our own domestic production.
Lot of special food in that one.
PPE,
take the golden time.
Basic hygiene products such as sanitizers is a demonstration of a problem. I'm not discouraged in the sense that that's a problem that's worldwide. I mean, China, which is the world's manufacturing avenue, didn't have enough with all that they manufacture. United States didn't have enough. States within the US were bidding against each other for sanitizers, for ventilators. In the UK, the healthcare workers were getting to a point where they were becoming very alarmed. The shipment would come from Turkey to the UK. And so I suppose the point I'm making with this is that we're not hopeless. I mean, there's really nothing, there's no problem that we're experiencing in Nigeria that characterizes us as some lost or basket case. But it is an opportunity for us to quickly scale up. And if there is one thing in Nigeria, we can literally do it. I don't believe there's anything that's done in the world that people here can find a way to do. And what we need to get to, and I say that a lot to the fellow regulators, is that we need to make sure that businesses and people are succeeding because of us, government, not in spite of us. And so if, I visited Dubai once, and I saw that some company had come and said they wanted to build some kind of a resort. And the municipality had gone to them, when is this going to be ready? What do you, and they asked me why? I said, well, because we want to put a train system here before you even finish. And so you see an investor who they're already finding a way to make sure he succeeds. But on the other hand, regulators in Nigeria see themselves as some kind of a referee who, with a whistle and a yellow card and red card. Whereas what we should first be is facilitators, trying to make business succeed in any way we can. And so that for me is the thing. But what I also find is that foreign businesses succeed here in spite of us. And so we must ask ourselves the question, both from, if the regulators can ask themselves the question, if we relax regulatory problems today, those who are taking the greatest advantage of ease of doing business are those who still fly across the Atlantic to arrive here. I'm telling you. So there needs to be, we have a skill, but a lack of readiness. And for those in diaspora, you can bring that readiness. Where else in the world can you find face masks in traffic? Today, there is face mask, all kinds of designs, all kinds of, party, there's not fashionably in face mask. Where else in the world do you inherent skill, entrepreneurship, and dynamic energy exists? And so you who have had the skill of the environment and all of that, and the government is doing some things, for instance, manufacturing equipment for medical devices or medical products and all of that. Zero duty. The government is putting a lot of money into that space now. If you're coming now to manufacture PPEs, medical grade face mask, hygiene product, government is committing to be an off-taker because they know that for the next several months, we're going to need these things. And so we also just have to, when you look at what works in the UK or in the US or wherever, you find out there are all kinds of small business programs, all kinds of things that even you didn't know about. The same thing in Nigeria. It's not that those things don't exist. We have to look for them, and where they are not, we have to advocate for them to exist. And we just must. There is no way of saying that the next Procter & Gamble will not start out in Nigeria just by making hand sanitizers in the next few months. There's no way. There's no way. We've deprecated ourselves to the point that we have now even begun to believe in our failure and lack of capabilities. And once we get to that point, it's a very slippery slope. Meanwhile, everywhere else in the world, they respect our ingenuity, they respect our dynamism and energy. But we have now come to blame it on, well, it's those places where the environment allows full expression. No. I mean, there's still no place where we're more discriminated against than the West. So for every success you see of our people in the West, is a fraction of what it could be.
That's true.
A fraction of what it could be. And so we must come back. We own this place together now. You know, Choika sang how many years ago? You push me, I push you.
I push you. That's true. That's true.
Wrestle the thing, rock it, push it. All the same at the end of the day. You know, I mean, and so that's where I come from. That's my approach to those things.
It's good. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, sir. And we'll take the final comment from Miss Edith Iwachuku. She's back. Miss Edith, I think she's got a comment. Go ahead, ma'am. You have the floor.
No. Okay. Well, did I raise my hand?
You did.
Well,
yes.
Anyway, I would just appreciate you, sir, for all the things that you brought to us. You know, for the clarity, everything is really perfectly understood, and all the work you're doing. Well done, keep it up. If we have more people like you, Nigeria will be a better place, more than where we are being rated at the moment. So I just urge you to take on board all the questions and suggestions most everyone has made, and keep, you know, moving forward the way you're doing. Well done. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much for that. On that note, we've practically run out of time. I probably want to say a big thank you on behalf of Nigerians in the diaspora. Dr. Irukera, I just want to say a big thank you for joining us this evening. We really appreciate you making time to be here with us, to Jojo with us, and we hope that when we call on you again, you will have that time, or you will make that time to also come join us, and so that we can forge a way forward for Nigeria. Thank you so much again, sir, for being part of this session today. And to our distinguished ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being on this session this evening. We have another one coming up on Saturday. Again, one of the executives will put the details within the messaging column. Dr. Irukera, thank you so much, sir, for being part of this session today, and we will keep a big round of applause for you, sir, for coming to be part of this.
Thank you.
We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Take care and good evening to all, or good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.